Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar on a groundbreaking zero code and zero role impact approach to protecting data and automating data privacy in SAP. First of all, a few logistics. This webinar is being recorded, and all registrants and attendees of the webinar will be receiving an email after the webinar is over with a link to view the video for the webinar. This is something that you can share with anyone that you think might find it useful. Also, another bit of logistics is that you can ask questions through the Q&A interface in the Zoom webinar application. You should see a Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. That's something that's through that you can ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll either be able to answer those questions while the webinar is going on, or we may save those for the Q&A section at the end. So that goes over our logistics for the webinar. And jumping into the agenda, today I'll introduce who we are and who we're joined with on this webinar. Our colleagues from the Customer Advisory Group have joined us, and I'll do some introductions. Then I'll go over some of the challenges of data protection in SAP, and we'll jump into a new approach and our new approach to a no code, no role impact to implementing preventive controls. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about dynamic data level controls as well. And then we have some time for some use cases and demos. And finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A section at the end. So for a little bit of an introduction, my name is Tony Burning. I'm a senior product manager here at NextLabs. And today I'm joined by James and Dina from the Customer Advisory Group, who will be able to add their perspective, as well as help out with some of the use cases and demos. So with that, we'll jump right in and get started. So one of the challenges, there's multiple challenges in protecting data within SAP, but the main challenge comes with balancing two opposing issues. One is the need to share, and that's for effective collaboration and for efficiency of the business, and balancing that with the need to protect the data. And that's for both competitive reasons in terms of securing intellectual property or financial data or anything else that needs to remain private, as well as complying with government regulations and industry regulations, and that's both for both compliance for legal reasons, as well as to prevent violations or prevent any fines that may handicap the business. So the question really is, how do we allow for the sharing that is necessary while protecting the data, both for business reasons as well as for compliance reasons? So, data protection is complex, and there's a lot of reasons why that's so, and this is also something that is becoming more of an issue as more and more things go online and become virtual. So one of the things that's important is that there are trade secrets that need to be protected, and that can take many forms. Some of that is pricing, some of that is the specific product specifications, how it's made, what are the ingredients that go into it, what are the contracts with suppliers, all of the trade secrets for a business that they don't want to share with their competitors. As things become more global, there's more data, there's more that's being moved around the world. It's going into different systems, different regulation and compliance regimes, and so it's a lot more complex to protect data in all of these different locations and forms that it may take. And so that's both on the customer side when selling to global audiences, as well as working with international suppliers and a globally distributed supply chain. And since things are spread around the world, there's the different protection that's required by different regulatory authorities. There's operating in Europe has different requirements than operating in the U.S. And even within the U.S., there's differences between different geographies, whether there's different laws in California than in other places within the U.S., and as well as in different industries have different regulations and requirements. And um, and with SAP storing all of this data from many organizations, there's a lot of complexity to making sure that the right data is protected in the right way. Um, so so moving on. And so because of this complexity, one of the risks is that that if using a role-based approach to security and data protection is what we call role explosion. And so here's just an example. I won't talk through all of it, but just as an example, you can see how the number of security roles can multiply greatly within an organization. And so especially when you go into organizations that have many different functional roles, potentially many different locations and say plants or company codes or different storage locations, the roles can quickly multiply and become very unwieldy, very it doesn't scale well. And so that results in higher maintenance costs, difficulties in monitoring and tracking the compliance with all of these different roles, as well as the more roles that you have and the more there's more surfaces for potential attacks, more potential. Uh, there's more opportunities for there to be issues or for missing certain requirements. Um, so that's one of the things that really benefits going with like a attribute-based access control model versus a role-based access control model. Yep. Now I'll hand it over to James, and he'll talk a little bit about what he sees with customers.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I couldn't agree with you more. We have the great honor of working with hundreds of customers around the world from the customer advisory group perspective, and there seem to be two common themes that we're seeing. The first one is that security organizations are required to do more with less, and unfortunately, there's the second theme of expanding access and compliance and risk data risk requirements and things that are just getting harder to do, and systems are getting more complex, environments are getting more complex, etc. Now the unfortunate part is that if you have those two contrasting things, using the traditional approaches to security like you talked about, such as having thousands of roles that potentially turn into hundreds of thousands of roles in scenarios where you have acquisitions or mergers, joint ventures, so on and so forth within your organizations, it can be very, very overwhelming and involve a ton of work trying to pigeonhole some of these new requirements that you talked about for data protection, utilizing the legacy security approaches that customers have. Case in point, we have organizations and customers that say, you know what, we just bought a new company, and this new company needs to be brought into our existing SAP systems right away. What does that translate into? Well, we have more data coming in, as well as we have a whole bunch of new users coming in with new security requirements. And in those situations, it doesn't just translate to creating a new batch of roles for all the new company codes, et cetera. It also means going in and making sure that your existing security infrastructure also has the proper protection built in. And I call those the security building blocks. So it isn't just about building new security building blocks in that explosion, Tony, that you mentioned. It's also the effort and the precision that is necessary to go in and modify the existing security building blocks to make sure that your other areas of the company or pre-existing areas of your company are protected as well. Now, the unfortunate part is it's not just the work, but the work is associated with tight deadlines as well. We speak with a lot of security organizations where they're told, we have this project to do. You have to create all these new security roles and levels and things, and it needs to be done by the end of the month because that's when everyone needs their access. And if people don't have the right access, they can't do their job. And there's a lot of pressure involved. And sometimes that translates into inconsistent, or what I call duct tape solutions of security. I think we've all sometimes otherwise had to make the hard decision, or use the term, we'll give them broad access now and then we'll fix it later, right? And unfortunately, those are famous last words where that fix never happens. And what all of that translates into is the potential of risk within your organization of people not having the right access. So we'll go to the next slide. The next component of this is the what I term the need for speed. And this is around security changes, right? I always like to ask customers, how long does it take for users to get their access changed within your company? And the reason I like to focus on this is that when it comes to data protection and the dynamic nature of how security requirements change for compliance, speed is very, very important. Unfortunately, we have some customers out there where it takes not only weeks, but potentially months for people to get their security modified and updated. And, you know, there can be a lot of concerns with that from the perspective of, hey, I don't have the right access to do my job and I have to wait for it. But more importantly, when it comes to the new data requirements and policies that Tony was referring to, there needs to be quick reaction, right? If I'm traveling to a country, say, for instance, that has different compliance standards, like he was referring to internationally, my security can't wait, right? It needs to be appropriate for where I am and when I am there, etc. So, with that said, the traditional model of approver-based type of I ask for access to be changed, approver makes a decision, so on and so forth, can take too much time. And at the end of the day, we're all here from a security perspective to make sure that users have the right access to do their job, nothing more, nothing less. But now we have to add the new phraseology of also at the right time. Um, I threw this test question in there. I always like to frame it from the perspective of, back in the old days when we were writing math tests. If Frank leaves on a plane to China going 400 miles an hour, blah 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 blah, that's actually the new reality when it comes to security. Is that security needs to dynamically change for people, not when they just have position changes, but also for the protection of data, depending on these new compliance standards around the world. And if they're not changing fast enough and the security is not dynamic enough, that raises some major, major security loopholes. And this is where NextLabs really can solve that problem. And this is why we recommend NextLabs to a lot of our organizations out there, because A, it focuses on making sure that you're not building these huge security infrastructures that might still have holes in them. It allows you to be more efficient as well as be more nimble outside of the traditional security tools that we all use today. And by NextLabs, as well as the traditional security infrastructures working together, it allows customers to really work smarter rather than harder and address those compliance and risk standards that are always evolving and changing at a very rapid rate. So with that said, Tony, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamin. Thanks for adding that perspective. I think that makes a lot of what we're talking about much more real. So with all of these challenges that organizations face and trying to solve those challenges, what we're talking about today is a new approach, we call it no code, no role impact approach to preventative controls. And so as we mentioned, the requirements are becoming increasingly complex. You've got the combination of different security threats, restrictions on data, regulatory requirements, as well as as James mentioned, like it's a bit of a race to keep up, and then changes and innovations within the field. So this complexity, as I mentioned before, can lead, if handled with a role-based approach, can lead to role explosion, and which is just not scalable and can't be maintained, or is too high of maintenance costs. So the next generation or next phase is what we call attribute-based access control, and that allows you to automate a lot of this protection and more efficiently manage the security. So, so going on to the next slide. So the way that this would work with the dynamic controls is that you have the enforcement point or the policy enforcement point, and that's actually where the policies are applied. But all of that is really driven by what's happening on the back end in real time. So so going to what's shown here on the bottom is the manager, the policy administration point. That's where you would define the policies and define them in uh, based on the attributes of the environment, the users, the data itself. That would all be defined and kept within the policy database to be referred to at when you reach the policy decision points. I mean, that's where you make the decision as to whether to allow access to this data. And so those policies are evaluated in real time and then enforced at the enforcement point. So that's at the point of data request. Um, that's where at the data access layer, that's where you're actually enforcing these policies in real time. And you're doing this evaluation and making the enforcement decision based on the values at the time or the attribute values at the time of data access. To move- Yep. So some of the benefits of having these dynamic data level controls is that first of all, it really simplifies the process of defining these controls. You don't have to uh, define a policy for every possible permutation. You just define your policy, your access policy, in terms of different attributes that are evaluated at the time of the request. So that makes it much simpler to define and administer those access control policies. That allows the business to be much more agile since they're dynamically defined. Any changes in the attributes are automatically applied, at the next access request. Um, and also reduces the costs of um, both yeah, for regulatory reasons of maintaining compliance with regulations as well as just keeping your data secure. And then finally, a lot of these are related, but enforcing those data privacy regulations and anonymizing the data where appropriate, that all feeds back into making sure that you are complying with the necessary regulations and um, you're not um, you're not caught out by any changes or anything that you haven't defined in a previously. So all of this is made much easier by applying the data level controls dynamically at the time of data request. So with the dynamic application, that then removes the need for excessive roles or reduces the risk of role explosion. So you can define much simpler policies that define who has access to what data and what resources based on the attributes. And as long as the attributes are kept up to date, and this could be role changes for users or groups that they're in or the offices they're working out of, or even how updates in government regulations, um, all of those once they've been updated are immediately apply and are dynamically enforced in real time at the time of data access. So you don't need to define new rules. You don't need to reassign. You don't need to define new roles. You don't need to reassign roles to users every time there's a change in that would impact their data access privileges. Here's an example of how this would work. And so this is a attribute-driven policy that's been defined. So there's user attributes. This is like their title, their location, their potential citizenship and nationality, what division they work in. There are environmental attributes. So the location of the resource that's being accessed, as well as the location of where the access request is coming from, what time of the day, and what device as well. And then there's resource attributes. So this would be how the data is classified, potentially the ECCN, and then also what application is it's being requested from. So those can all be taken together, and we have an example here of, allowing, just a manager who's a U.S. citizen, access to this data during their specific working hours and their specific office location, and then you can define which actions they are allowed to perform. So you can say that this particular user is allowed to just view view the data, or maybe they are allowed to create um, new data objects or change the data objects as well, depending on how the policy is defined. Um, so, um, so now I believe I'll be turning it over to Dina, and she'll go through some specific use cases and how these get applied to um, in the real world. Dina?
In this session, I would like to cover the filtering of authorizations in SAP systems. I have a lot of customers who have, for example, hundreds of sales organizations or organizational units which are just where they have a lot of entities. And certainly for the sales organizations, to give an example, these customers do not want to derive all their sales roles to all the sales organizations, to hundreds of them every time. So they are looking for an easier way where they can maintain the data more easily and make sure that people only have access to the sales organization they're supposed to have. So NextLabs offers the option to filter the data a user can see, change, or create in an SAP system with the filtering option. What I want to show first is how a general user without filtering option can go into the SAP system and see all data. So this user right now, demo user 02, does not have any restrictions. The user can, for example, let's go into change sales orders and select any change order, a sales order they want. And I'm just trying to look into sales organization 1000 right now. So we see here 3 entries which are found. User can select them. And change the sales orders for sales organization 1000 in this case. Back one step. Let's look for another sales order in sales organization 0001. Go to this one. Also, user can change sales orders from sales organization 0001. So what we saw right now, this user with general access can, for example, change sales orders from sales organization 1000 as well as from sales organization 0001. Now set up a user with restricted access. That user has also the same roles and authorizations that the other user had. Say the same profile, sub all, sub new, really huge authorizations. And this is not how it should go in the backend system, but just to show you that there is no restriction on organizational levels. The other restriction we have with this user is that this user is right now in department 0001. So we set up the filtering where we said, first of all, we define a resource. What do we want to filter? And what I want to filter is table DB AAK because that is the underlying table behind transactions to create change or display sales orders. So here in the resource, I only define the table, the text, description, and condition. The table is ABAC. Once that is done, I've defined the resource on which I want to restrict access. I define people who can have access to that resource. In this case, I choose department is 0001. I select the users from department 001 with the condition that the department in SAP that I just showed you in the user master record is 0001. And then I combine the subject and the resource in the policy where I set up a filtering for the table VBAK, where I set the subject, so should be in department 0001, which I defined before. And the table resource is in the component table VBAK, which I also defined before. And certainly what I need to do is then also to define the restrictions. The restrictions I defined is that VK org in this case should be 0001. Only when this is given, the user will be restricted. The user who is in the department 0001 will be restricted on the sales organization 0001 in table VBAK. How does this look for the user? I've shown the user I've shown you the user demo user ST1 before, who's restricted on sales organization 0001. Now I'm going to log on as this user. I also want to change sales order. I execute transaction VA02. And then I'll look at the purchase order, sales orders in sales organization 1000. So because I have the restriction on sales organization 0001 only, I can see no values for this selection for sales organization 1000. I want to see the sales orders for sales organization 0001. And the 5 entries we saw before with the other user are coming up here too. I can select one, search for it, open it, and change it again. So with the filtering of the table VBAK, I can restrict people to be only able to access a certain sales organization, in this case 0001, without setting up derived roles for hundreds of sales organizations. One issue companies have a lot is restricting people on access to fields that are not organizational values or do not even have an authorization check, an underlying authorization check in a transaction. I'm going to go into purchase orders right now, and we'll just select a purchase order. And we can see the different fields in the purchase order now. And we know that we don't have a restriction on purchase order, the number itself. We can set up restrictions for vendors, but definitely we have restrictions for the order type and other items here. I just want to select right now because we have a restriction for order type already in the current authorizations concept that SAP delivers. I want to choose a field where we have no authorization check on. For example, like currency, in this case, it's US dollars. And why do I want to select this field? Without NextLabs, if we wanted to restrict on a certain field where no authorization check is given by SAP, it would have to create a modified SAP transaction with authorization checks inserted by developers. And then we have to test everything and just to make sure that everything is working fine, create our own authorization object, eventually insert it and make sure that we have the right authorizations then in the roles too. So with NextLab, that is not required anymore. You can authorize people or restrict the authorizations of people to fields which do not have an authorization check, but are visible in the application, like the currency right now. So now, right now I have a couple of purchase orders here. This is 29 with US dollar currency. I just go back and want to select more purchase orders. And when you scroll down, you see I have 55 purchase orders that I found here. So I'm going to look in the next one into 45 couple others. And here we have the currency PTE. And I think I want to restrict the next user on the currency PTE. So what I did is I set up filtering of the table EKKO, which is underlying or behind the transaction to change a purchase order, create a purchase order. And as shown before, I have to define the table first as a resource in NextLabs. I just define the table. Further down, the table is EKKO. So that's the table we want to do restrictions on. And then I have to define the subjects or the users in this case. And I just say the department is PTE. I select the user type. And in this case, I say the department SAP is PTE. That is only because I don't have right now other values to restrict on than SU01 data of the user ID. I set up the policy with the subject and the resource. Altered the filter of AKKO and said the subjects that are affected are all users who have department PTE. Resource components is the table EKKO on a certain system. I can also restrict it on multiple systems or leave that out. And then I define the filtering condition, which is that the field WAERS, that's the currency field, in the table EKKO is PTE. Going to log out with this user. And I'm going to log in with a user who has a restriction on currency PTE. It would be demo user P01. So with the other user we saw who has no restriction at all, that this user can access 55 purchase orders. Let's see what this user here can do. Go to the purchase order again. I'm just going to select the purchase orders without any filtering. If I scroll down, I see that this user only has 29 entries found. I'll look at the purchase order we had before. The one with the type EC and number ending with 29. That isn't even shown here because it has the currency US dollars. If I go and select this purchase order, for example, I can see that this user is able to access all purchase orders where the currency is PTE. So without having set up any coding in the SAP system, without having a field like currency as an organizational field in the roles, or any field where I can restrict access to a user in the SAP authorization concept, with the filtering provided by NextLabs, I can still filter the users to access only certain data that I could never restrict that easily with the SAP authorization concept. Also, for very small organizations, using NextLabs is very practical. For example, if you're a small organization in a certain location, a small purchasing organization, for example, and you want people there to be able to create and maintain purchase orders, but also to be able to release the purchase orders. However, you just want to make sure that people do not release the purchase order that they created or maintained themselves. And certainly there are organizational restrictions that you could apply. You could set up controls. You could also start to work on a workflow that makes sure that if somebody creates or maintains a purchase order, the release is done by a different person. However, that requires some coding, interaction, changing the SAP standard. And instead of doing that, you can set up a policy in NextLabs to make sure that people cannot release the purchase order that they created or maintain themselves. Right now, I'm in an SAP system logged on as the demo user who has wide access. And I just want to show you how that would work. I go to table, for example, SE16 to table echo, and look at all the purchase orders that are in the system. And here we see a lot of purchase orders which have been created by a user named Düngelhof. So I would like to make sure that this user does not release or approve his own purchase orders. And right now with the demo user 02 that I have, I can go into the release of the purchase orders and select the purchase orders I want to release. And because I still have wide access for this demo user, I can select up to 55 entries, open purchase orders, and certainly also the purchase order that was created by the user Düngelhof. I'm going to log out of the system with demo user 02. I will now log on as the user Düngelhof. Now, for example, with this user ID, who is not able to see or release their own data when we go to the table echo and execute it. Okay, I've now logged in as user Dummelhof, and I'm going to S16 first, check the table entries in the table echo. I'm just going to want to see all the table entries. And right now, I don't see any table entries with my name Dummelhof here. Let's scroll a little bit down. And I go now to 2028 to approve some purchase orders. And when I want to select the purchase orders, scroll down and I only find 40 entries. So I do not find the other 15 entries that I created myself. I also do not find the purchase order, for example, that we just looked at, the NB, with zeros at the end. That is not in there because I created or maintained that purchase order myself. How did we do that? We set up a new filtering rule in NextLabs. We said we're going to restrict the data of the table EKKO to those people who did not create a purchase order themselves. So only the user himself can will be affected. We're looking at table EKKO. When we go further down, we see that now we have a more complex SQL queries to set up to make sure that all the purchase orders are selected, that were not created by the user himself or herself that is logging on. This is how we restrict the access then for very small organizations, so that a user who executed one activity is not able to execute the following activity. The organization is very small.
All right, thanks, Tina. So now we'll open up the floor for questions. Again, ask your questions using the Q&A interface within the Zoom webinar, and then we'll get to them. One question that we have is whether the solutions that we've shown are like just for SAP, and the answer to that is no. We have DAE, for instance, can be used with any ODBC database, and many other databases. So it's a much more general solution than just for SAP. So we do support other applications. As we wait for questions to come in, I'll just also give James and Dina an opportunity to cover anything that they feel like they get asked or run into regularly, but may not have been covered so far in this webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. This is James. Yeah, I've had the great opportunity of working in SAP security now for over 27 years, and through my time, I've been asked a lot of the hard questions, right? Where people say, you know, this field, we have to control it. You know, we need to make sure that it's otherwise hidden, or we need to base roles and security privileges off of securing down to this field. And a lot of times, of course, the SAP authorization concept it contains authorizations to do that, and sometimes it doesn't. And as Dina showed in her demo, I really want to highlight that it's, being able to secure a field that is outside the traditional authorization concept is something that we all have to face as security administrators. And it can be very challenging to do it the traditional way. So back in the old days, before products like this existed, just like Dina highlighted, we would have to basically take a copy of that transaction, modify it from an ABAC perspective, create custom authorization objects and all that great stuff. And we could accomplish it, but there's some legacy overhead that goes along with that, right? Now you have to maintain your own custom transaction code. We need to also secure the original SAP transaction code so people can't use the backdoor to get it, so on and so forth. And that overhead is what I was referring to as being the complexity, right? The opportunity for inconsistency, and also the extra work that goes along with maintaining that long term. And we have a lot of customers that are long-term SAP people who have been through many upgrades, and now are also transitioning to the new platforms from SAP, S/4HANA, et cetera. And they have a lot of this legacy built up of custom transaction codes, that have been there just even for security purposes. And the challenge is kind of the care and feeding of those as they move up through the upgrades. Anyways, long story short is that now by utilizing tools like NextLabs, we have an alternative that provides the same end result of being able to secure it, but without a lot of that extra custom code overhead that will kind of have to be fed and cared for long term. And I think that's fantastic, and it streamlines and helps customers being able to transition in the future to the new platforms and doing upgrades, et cetera, without having to do all the testing, all the maintenance, all the tweaks, et cetera, just for a simple thing such as, hey, we need to secure this field, which we don't have an authorization object that controls.
Yeah, great thanks for the additional information from your experience. We have had a couple of questions come in, so I'll try to go through those. One question was if the solution works across SAP S/4 and EWM application, and the answer is yes. Also, whether can use a custom table as a source to restrict access users. So this would be as an attribute source, and then whether it works for custom transactions. And the answer to both of those is yes. So since DAE is working at the data access layer, it's relatively independent of the SAP transactions that are being used to access the data. And you can incorporate many different sources of attributes to formulate the policy. And then so also related to that, can we use multiple layers of restrictions like PO type implant? And yes, you can. The policies are designed to incorporate many different types of attributes from many sources that would then be evaluated dynamically at the time of data access. So, so the answer to that is yes as well.
Oh, I think going back to the last question, I think you saw it in the last example I gave, that you do not have to just restrict different fields on values, but you can also select the, using queries, so you can have multiple restrictions easily set up with queries in NextLabs.
Yes. Thanks, Dina. Okay. So pause just a minute, and while I'm waiting to see if there's any additional questions that come in, I just do want to reiterate and remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, has been recorded, and will be distributed to everyone who registered for the webinar and attended the webinar today. As soon as we finish doing the post-processing and getting the video uploaded. So you should be getting an email with a link to that later today. you can share this with anyone that you think would find it useful. And we'll also have it posted and accessible through the NextLabs website as well after after it is available online. So with that, I see no more unanswered questions right now. So if no one has anything else, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you have following up, and we will be following up with everyone who registered and attended the webinar. So so thanks again.